U.S. Senate.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Granite State Debates. I am WMUR Political Director Josh McKelvin, and thank you for joining us for our live Granite State Debate series. Tonight, we are joined by the Republican candidates for U.S. Senate. But first, let's go over the format. Each candidate will have a brief opening statement, followed by questions asked by myself and the panelists. Answers will be limited to 60 seconds, and rebuttals will be allowed if I see that they are appropriate. Candidates will also have a closing argument, and these are the rules that the candidates agreed to participate. So let's meet the candidates, beginning with former state senator Jim Rubins.
Jim Rubins was born in New York City and attended Dartmouth College. He has founded and run a number of small businesses, including one in recycling, and has also been an investor for high-tech New England startups. Rubins was a two-term state senator and led the Granite State Coalition against expanded gambling. He is married, has one child, and lives in Etna.
Mr. Rubins, your opening statement, please.
I am going to show you that I'm the conservative in this race. I started life in the bottom, and I've learned a lot from the School of Hard Knocks. I'm a small businessman, and I've created jobs right here in the state. And like many of you folks, I'm a family man, and I've got a son in college, so I understand your concerns and your challenges. Now I'd like to run for the U.S. Senate to turn our great nation around.
Thank you, sir. Our next candidate tonight is the incumbent in this race, Senator Kelly Ayotte.
Kelly Ayotte was born in Nashua, graduated from Penn State, and received her law degree from Villanova. She joined the New Hampshire Attorney General's office as a prosecutor before Governor Craig Benson named Ayotte as his legal counsel. She was the Deputy Attorney General before becoming the state's first female Attorney General. She was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2010. She still lives in Nashua with her husband and two children.
Senator Ayotte, your opening statement, please.
Thank you for listening tonight. It is an honor to be your voice in the Senate, where I'm focused on delivering results. And I am willing to work with anyone to solve problems, and that's what I've done to get bipartisan legislation passed to address our heroin epidemic, to work to create better paying jobs, and to keep our country safe. There's so much more work to be done, and I want to keep fighting for you and your family.
Senator, thank you very much. Those are the candidates. Now let's meet our panelists. Dan Toohey is a reporter for the New Hampshire Union Leader. John DeStaso is our political reporter here at WMUR. And Josh Rogers reports for New Hampshire Public Radio. So with all that out of the way, let's get things started, and let's start at the top of the ticket. Senator Ayotte, you've said that you will support and vote for Donald Trump, although you won't necessarily endorse him. You've told the Union Leader that he's a successful businessman and a good father. But are you confident, as a spouse of a veteran and a parent yourself, with him having final say over U.S. foreign policy and as Commander-in-Chief?
Well, I've said that I'll be voting for the Republican nominee, and I've had some disagreements with him. But I believe when we look at things like the disastrous Iran deal that unfortunately Governor Maggie Hassan supports, and we look at where we are around the world, that we do need new leadership for our country. And in the Senate, I've been focused on making sure on the Armed Services Committee that we ensure that our men and women in uniform have what they need. I've been fighting to make sure that this administration doesn't focus on sending dangerous terrorists around the world into the United States of America by releasing them from Guantanamo. And to me, these are real foreign policy issues, and it's important that we have a commander-in-chief that is going to take us in a stronger direction when it comes to Iran and making sure that our men and women in uniform have what they need in a very dangerous world.
Senator, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Rubins, unlike Senator Ayotte, you have lately been very outspoken in your support for Donald Trump. But back in 2015, you told supporters that you would not be voting for him. Without turning this question into a comparison to Hillary Clinton, why now do you think that Donald Trump would be a good president?
You can't be on both sides of this issue. I'm voting for Donald Trump, and I've endorsed him. And anything less than that is simply support for Hillary Clinton. And I find that Donald Trump, and feel that he would exercise greater restraint in the implementation and use of military force than Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton and my opponent here have shown a predilection to excessive use of nation-building wars that have led us to spreading terrorism throughout the nation and making us less safe. I also find that and feel that Donald Trump would work with Congress, unlike Obama, and he would consult with Congress, and I think we would, in the strategic strategic quest to keep America safe would use Article 1, Section 8. And if the war is necessary, it would be declared by Congress, and Donald Trump would work with Congress in that process. So again, I differ with Hillary Clinton and my opponent on a failed nation-building war strategy that has led to less security for America.
Senator, you were brought into Mr. Rubin's answer. Would you like a rebuttal?
Yes, in the Senate, I've been one of the greatest critics of the Obama administration when it comes to them releasing dangerous prisoners from Guantanamo. Unfortunately, 30% of them have gotten back in the fight or are suspected of getting back in the fight. On the Iran deal that we've seen, obviously, this ransom payment, and they've taken 3 more hostages, American hostages, since then. And also, I've been a critic on issues like making sure that we had a follow-on in Libya instead of what happened with this administration, and not having a strategy to make sure that that did not become a haven for terrorists.
All right, Senator, thank you very much. Let's get to our panel now. First question, a very important issue coming from John DeStaso.
Thank you, Josh. Mr. Rubins, this one's for you. It's on a major issue, gun violence. You've expressed concerns about a strict ban on people on the no-fly list or terrorist watch list buying firearms, citing due process and Second Amendment concerns. Why should those concerns outweigh public safety?
I will fiercely resist any attempt to weaken the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. And terrorists and criminals will simply buy guns on the black market. These feel-good anti-gun bills will do nothing. So I differ sharply with the incumbent, my opponent, on her vote to work with Chuck Schumer to give Loretta Lynch the power to abrogate due process and to weaken our gun rights and to put people on a no-gun list. My opponent has supported and opposed. She has opposed New Hampshire's Stand Your Ground law. She has opposed constitutional carry. These are issues now that we have ISIS on, we have enemies on U.S. soil. At this exact point, this is exactly not the time to be weakening our gun rights. This is exactly the time when we should empower and support peace and freedom-loving Americans to use their God-given Second Amendment rights to defend self, family, and community, using those rights.
Senator, you have the opportunity to rebut if you'd like.
I've strongly supported the constitutional rights of the people of New Hampshire, but I also strongly believe that if you're a terrorist or a criminal, that you shouldn't have a firearm. And so what I did was work to make sure there was a mechanism to protect people's constitutional rights in our judicial system that does not work right, that is not in place right now, that does in place under our legislation, but also making sure that if you're a terrorist, that you cannot purchase a firearm, that there's a delay in that purchase so law enforcement can act.
We're going to keep this discussion going. Let's go back to John DeStaso.
It's a follow-up for Senator Ayotte. Over the past few years, several mass shootings have been perpetrated by people with mental health issues. Neither of you are in favor of expanding background checks, but without specific information on mental health, how do you keep weapons out of the hands of mentally ill people?
Well, I've strongly supported fixing the system that does not have our mental health records in it. And in fact, the legislation I voted for in the Senate was making sure that we would get the mental health records in, that New Hampshire's been very behind on. And I've also worked to reform our mental health system. I think it's so important that we have a system that better serves the people of New Hampshire in this country. And I've also led bipartisan legislation to make sure that there's actually early warning and detection, and people have the training to detect the signs to get people the help that they need.
All right, thank you very much, Senator. Let's keep it going with the panel. Next question is coming from Josh Rogers of NHPR.
So this question is for both of you. We'll go to Mr. Rubins first. The intelligence community indicates that many of the warning signs of terrorism, both in the United States and abroad, can be found on social media. What can the government do to enhance terror plot detection in the cyber world without violating privacy?
Right. We've found that these abrogations of the Fourth Amendment do almost nothing to defeat terrorism. So I have an extensive plan to resist and kill ISIS on my website, jimrubins.com. Number one, we've got to reject Hillary Clinton and my opponent, Kelly Ayotte's failed nation-building war strategy. They have advocated going into Libya, bomb Libya, now we've got an ISIS haven. They've gone into Syria, arm and train the so-called moderates, and now we've got an ISIS caliphate. And more recently, they've advocated arming with bombs Saudi Arabia, that they're dropping on children and hospitals in Yemen. It's created a massive human disaster, refugees, a humanitarian crisis. What we do need to do is seal our borders so the bad guys and drug mules can't get in. We've got to force Saudi Arabia to cease and desist funding terrorists and terror ideology. And we've got to, if war is necessary, go to Congress, respect our veterans and soldiers, go to Congress under Article 1, Section 8, and declare war, including a plan to win and exit.
Mr. Rubin, specific to the question, how do you police the internet?
We, as a part of my plan, again, I have to send you to jimrubins.com because it's many, many points in my plan to defeat terrorism, and we need a social media campaign. It may be in part government run, it may be in part run by volunteers, but we need to push back in every way possible against this marketing campaign. And I go to Saudi Arabia again. Saudi Arabia, we know, they funded the people who killed almost 3,000 Americans on 9/11. Saudi Arabia is the world's leading funder of terror and terror ideology. So these are the people we've got to shut down, and you cannot stop terrorism if we leave countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia funding terrorism.
Mr. Rubins, it's time for...
It's a fundamental flaw.
Senator, you were invoked again by Mr. Rubins. If you'd like to rebut on this question, feel free.
Well, I'd like to answer Josh's question. Right now, unfortunately, having been a prosecutor myself, the FBI is missing a tool in their toolbox. And in fact, we had a vote on the Senate on this. Right now, in a child pornography case, for example, you can get basic internet records that they're being limited from getting in a terrorism case. And we're not talking about content, we're actually talking about basic records of when people connect online that they're being denied. And I voted to support that in the Senate. It failed by 1 vote. And I know one thing, we need to also really encourage Twitter and Facebook. They've taken down thousands of sites related to terrorism, and this can be one where we call on the private sector to make sure that when people are promoting terrorism, that they take these sites down, and they've already to act in that regard, because we cannot allow ISIS to promote terrorism, but we have to make sure our first responders have the tools that they have in a basic criminal case, in a terrorism case.
So, Senator, would you support military action to counter a cyber attack on the country's infrastructure, such as our power grid or a banking system?
Well, Josh, I would say that I would support making sure we need to do what we need to do to keep the country safe. And it would depend on the circumstances, but I know one thing, we need to improve our cyber response, and we have professionals that are focused on not only defending the nation against cyber attacks, but really focusing on counterattacks in the cyber realm. And obviously, we would have to look at what happens and have an appropriate response. But I've been very disappointed, for example, in instances where you've seen China and Russia attacking us in the cyber world, and we have not come up with an appropriate response. And even when we think about economic sanctions and things that we can use, the first tools in our toolbox before we ever go to military force, those are the types of actions we have to go to. But we have to protect this country. If someone comes after our critical infrastructure, we have to take appropriate steps to make sure that we stop them and make sure that that does not happen again.
So what about you, Mr. Rubins? Would you support military action to counter a cyber attack?
We have a failed military strategy promulgated by Hillary Clinton and my opponent here, okay? It's not working. It's spread terrorism. It's made America less safe. We need a fundamental rethink of military strategy. We need the strongest, most technologically advanced military in the world. We've got to look out 50 years at potential enemies, and we need to defend. We need to defend the high ground of freedom, which are the sea lanes, the public space, international sea lanes, in space and communications. And when we rethink this strategy, we'll be thinking about stopping pork that is being used in military spending. My opponent voted for things like the F-35 fighter, which is pork. She opposes a military base closing commission round, which will eliminate pork. We need to be, again, totally focused on realigning our strategy around long-term and short-term threats, and then spending every nickel that we have on national defense focused on those threats.
Senator,
we're not doing that now.
Senator, you can respond if you'd like.
To be clear, I have been a big critic of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy. And for example, when they withdrew our troops from Iraq, creating the vacuum that we saw ISIS rise from, I was very critical of that. The Iran deal, the transfer of prisoners from Gitmo. And, this is an area, of course, where I differ very much with Governor Maggie Hassan in terms of her full-throated defense of the Clinton foreign policy when it comes to Iran, when it comes to, she won't even tell us whether she would support having terrorists transferred to the United States.
Thank you, Senator. We're actually going to move on to another issue now that New Hampshire voters see is the number one issue facing the state.
Please, I need to add
We're going to keep the discussion going.
Senator,
please.
and Hillary Clinton have approximately the same
Senator, you agree to the rules
policies.
of this debate.
I'm done.
Thank you very much. All right, moving forward now. It is the number one issue facing the state according to New Hampshire voters, and that's the crisis of addiction. Question coming from Dan Toohey, the union leader.
Thank you, Josh. Senator Ayotte, you co-sponsored and championed the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, which set a framework to get funds to New Hampshire to fight the opioid crisis. To date, none of that money has reached the streets here in the Granite State. When will that happen?
Well, I was proud to support the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act and work on a bipartisan basis for 3 years, supported by stakeholders here in New Hampshire focused on prevention, treatment, and recovery and getting things done. And since that time, I've been advocating for more resources to address this epidemic. And in fact, last year, the Senate passed an additional almost 50% increase in funding focused on the heroin epidemic. That money's coming to the state. It was $320 million. This year, they've approved $460, which is almost another 40% increase. So yes, we need to fund that framework, and I'm not going to continue. I'm going to keep fighting until it's fully funded because New Hampshire needs the help.
When is that money going to get here?
Well, some of the resources are coming here from what already had been appropriated, and now we're going to continue to fight to get more of it on now that the bill has passed so that we can fully fund the framework.
Okay. Back to Dan.
Mr. Rubens, question for you, sir. Do you think the opiate epidemic, let me answer the question, or field it for you, then you may respond. Do you think the opiate epidemic can be solved by building a wall and securing the borders and having states pay for addiction treatment?
What I think, I served, as I mentioned, I was a co-founder of one of our state's first addiction and alcohol abuse crisis centers, and I wrote a book on addiction psychology. What we need to confront, first of all, is that the war on drugs, we spent $1 trillion on it, it has completely failed. The drugs are cheaper and easier to get than ever before. You can get fentanyl in the Valley Street Jail right here in Manchester, okay? So we need to look at other countries. What have they done? We can look at a country like Switzerland, and they have a rate of opioid overdose deaths 1/20th the rate that we have here in New Hampshire. And what we can learn from them is they have replaced the incarceration prohibition strategy with treatment on demand. And they've taken the money, the $32,000 a year to keep folks in jail, they've taken that money and they've used that money, because remember, our nation is bankrupt, we're out of money, they've taken that money to fund treatment on demand. Now, I've also proposed, I've proposed that the federal government allow the states to legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana. And I believe in New Hampshire, should the state wish to do this, we'll be able to raise very sufficient sums of money to fund a comprehensive addiction and alcohol treatment program in the state, which is woefully underfunded. And CARA, even if CARA is fully funded.
Senator. 60 seconds from the answer. Please play by the rules.
Okay.
All right. Now, shifting gears now to climate change. We're going to start with you on this one, Mr. Rubens. For years, you represented the Union of Concerned Scientists, a group that has advocated for strong federal regulation against polluters. But do you still support regulations to curb climate change, or have your position has changed on this?
Yeah, I don't support regulations. I oppose Maggie Hassan and Senator Ayotte, both of whom have endorsed President Obama's EPA global warming regulations. It's 600 some odd pages of hyper complex regulations that will do nothing. Obviously, I think that global warming is a problem that we need to deal with, and the way that I would deal with it is eliminate all subsidies, all mandates associated with energy, so that the free market, and I'm an entrepreneur and I invest in startup companies, so that the free market can determine which form of energy is right for which consumer and which business. We also need to spearhead and spark plug the incredible talent we have in this country for innovation. And we can innovate cheaper, cleaner, abundant energy. There's going to be a phenomenal increase in demand worldwide for increased energy. I want to export that product from the United States of America. I want to bring the jobs home, and I want to stop buying energy from our enemies.
Thank you, Mr. Rubens. Senator Ayotte, back in 2010, you said there wasn't conclusive evidence that climate change was a result of human activities. Has your position or opinion on this changed?
I believe that human activities do have an impact on our climate, and that's why I've supported protecting New Hampshire's environment. And, you know, this is obviously a change for Mr. Rubens, who has supported a carbon tax, which I would not support. But what I do support is common sense ways to address through energy efficiency and really giving New Hampshire the credit for the efforts that they have made already to reduce pollution in this state. And that's why I have supported the Clean Power Plan, because I think it's really important that we protect New Hampshire's environment. We have such a beautiful state. It's such an important part of our economy and who we are. And that's gone back to my time as Attorney General, where I focused on protecting our environment.
I'm going to let you respond to that in just a second, Mr. Rubens. But so your opinion has evolved a little bit from 2010 when you signed a pledge saying that you wouldn't support any or certain legislation involved with climate change, but the Clean Power Plant you do support. Yes, Senator?
I've supported very much really protecting our environment going back to my time as Attorney General. And if you look at the work I did as Attorney General, protecting our state from the pollution from the Midwest power plants so that we weren't the tailpipe from the Midwest, making sure that we protect New Hampshire's clean air and water, and I've taken that policy to the Senate. And we have a long bipartisan tradition in our state in protecting our environment, and that's important because it's who we are, it's part of our economy, and I want to make sure it's there for my children in the future of New Hampshire.
Senator pointed out that you supported a carbon tax. Mr.
Yeah, a carbon tax
30
won't
seconds.
work. A carbon tax won't work. But again, my opponent has supported EPA, and Maggie Hassan, by the way, both support Obama's EPA climate regulations, which is greenwash. This is important for folks who buy the science of global warming. It's greenwash because it will do nothing. James Hansen is the world's leading, best-known climate scientist, and he says it will do nothing. Even in the rule itself, if you read in on page 400, it says it will do nothing to change the energy mix of the country. But what it will do, it will tangle states in massive amount of regulatory bureaucracy, slow down energy innovation in the country, and not do anything to fix the problem. So it's greenwash. It's pointless.
Thank you, Mr. Rubens. Next question coming from the panel, John DeStaso on immigration.
Yes, immigration. And Senator Ayotte, in 2013, you called the so-called Gang of Eight comprehensive immigration reform bill, quote, a thoughtful bipartisan solution to a tough problem, close quote, and have insisted that it is not a form of amnesty, despite what critics say. Do you still support that bill or something very close to it? And would you sponsor such a bill should you be reelected?
I support solving the problem of our broken immigration system, and so I'm going to work to make sure we get that done, because we have a situation where we have an illegal immigration problem, and so I supported doubling the amount of agents, doubling the amount of fencing, creating an entry-exit system that doesn't exist right now. 40% of the people who are here illegally overstay their visa, a strong E-Verify system, and a system that makes sure our legal immigration system works for us to grow our country and strengthen our country.
Okay. And Mr. Rubens, short of deporting everyone who is here illegally or giving certain people a path to citizenship, how is the nation to deal with the 11 million undocumented or illegal immigrants? What is the Rubens solution to those who are here illegally?
We start with this fundamental principle that any immigration reform be good and help the American people, American citizens here now. So I fundamentally disagree with my opponent. Broke her promise. I supported you in part because she promised not to do amnesty and to secure the borders. And she gets down there to Washington, drinks that Kool-Aid they serve, and voted for the Gang of Eight, open borders, amnesty, drive down American wages bill. What we do need to do is secure the border. And we can pay for this very quickly, year one, by simply cutting off welfare for illegal aliens. We need to get serious about this. We need to enforce E-Verify. We can do this, and E-Verify, they've done this in Arizona so that the jobs go to American citizens and those legally entitled to be here. My opponent voted to fund sanctuary cities. We need to stop funding sanctuary cities. We need to deport, and here's who we deport. We need to deport illegal aliens who are felony committers and drug dealers, and I also vigorously disagree with my opponent's vote for this Gang of Eight bill. It would have increased by 30 million the number of legal immigrants over the first 10 years. It would have flooded.
We have a soundproof tube that's going to drop out of the ceiling over you. No, we don't have that, but come on, play by the rules. Okay. All right, take 30 seconds to rebut, please.
Just to be clear, what I've supported is anyone who is here, send the criminals home. Anyone else here, get in the back of the line, pay back taxes, learn English, have a job, and not get in front of anyone else, but making sure that we actually solve this problem. And I've voted against sanctuary cities to end them, and this is a big difference in this race between myself and Governor Maggie Hassan, who in her time in the state Senate actually supported to keep sanctuary cities in place. I think that our law enforcement should be working at all levels, and sanctuary cities are dangerous. When I think about that young woman who was killed in California, that should have never happened.
Time is up. Thank you very much. Going back to the panel now.
So, sir, a follow-up for Mr. Rubens. On refugees, do you support a moratorium on refugees from certain countries? And if so, which countries?
Absolutely. I support a complete shutdown of immigration, refugee intake from any country known to harbor terrorists and any country known not to have an effective documentation system for folks coming in. So this would certainly include countries like Pakistan. It would probably include Yemen. It would include Iraq and Syria. Any countries known to harbor terrorism, we've got to stop. What we do need to do, because we've got a massive humanitarian crisis, a refugee crisis due to Hillary Clinton and Kelly Ayotte's failed nation-building wars. What we do need to do, and it's again on my website, jimrubens.com, we need to create places where these refugees, as close as possible to where they live, are safe and secure in those locations. We've seen what happens when we have these flood and this immigration bill. Again, when you flood the marketplace, as they're seeing in Europe, with immigrants and refugees, it doesn't work. Assimilation doesn't work, and you drive down wages.
All right, Mr. Rubens, you were invoked again, Senator. It's your choice.
Same question to you, Senator, please.
I firmly believe that no one should come here as a refugee unless we can guarantee that they don't have connections to ISIS. And I've supported in the Senate strengthening our vetting of the refugees that are coming here. Unfortunately, the Senate Democrats block this. This is also another area, I have to say, where Governor Maggie Hassan has not been clear. And I think it's important that we're clear. Unless you can guarantee that someone coming here is not connected with ISIS, they shouldn't come. But I also have to say, with Mr. Rubens' position, what about those who have worked as translators for our men and women in uniform in Afghanistan? I think you have to look on each individual and guarantee whether each individual, but we also know there have been some brave people who have done a lot for our military. And so I wouldn't want to prohibit somebody like that who's put their life on the line for our military if they're an appropriate refugee from coming here.
Mr. Rubens, take 30 seconds.
On that subject, I'm going to return to another issue here. This is the gang of
you have a choice to rebut.
This touches directly on this issue, because when you flood a country, a nation, as they've seen in Europe, as my opponent here has suggested in her Gang of Eight bill, it would have added 30 million more legal immigrants to our state. It would have doubled and tripled H-1B visas, and both of these things would have caused failure of assimilation. They've seen this problem in Europe, and it would have driven down American wages. Again, we need immigration policies that are good for American citizens.
Moving forward and bringing it home now, talk about the turmoil we're seeing in a lot of our communities. First question goes to you, Mr. Rubens. What does the term Black Lives Matter mean to you?
I wrote an op-ed in the Union Leader, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, called Black Fatherhood Matters. And we've seen, I'm commenting on the
No, please go right ahead.
Yeah. So what we've seen is about 2 out of 3 black families, particularly in these urban areas, there's no father in the home. Huge numbers of families don't have the parents in the home. So we need to be fostering marriage. We need to be fostering fatherhood. And this is going to require very significant changes to our social welfare system. Our welfare system actually subsidizes family breakdown. And this is in part a cause of the violence, and it's in part a cause of the dissent we see here. So I'm proposing we change the welfare system to encourage folks who are married, who are intact families where the father stays in the home, help those folks who have jobs.
Senator, how do you interpret Black Lives Matter?
I firmly believe that all lives matter, including our blue lives, because I believe that the police are part of the solution to the racial division that we've seen, and we need leadership to bring us together. But having worked with the police in our state, I know how phenomenal they are, how hard they work. And when they come to a crime scene, they don't care what your background is. They're going to protect you and solve that crime on your behalf. And what I'd like to see is really the police are part of our solution of working together, community policing, and we've seen it in New Hampshire, that makes us stronger. And I hope that we can see that at a national level.
All right, let's thank you, candidates, for the answers. Let's go back to the panel. Dan Toohey.
Thank you. Question for both of you. Senator Ayotte, we'll start with you first. Senator Ayotte, you introduced legislation yesterday to prevent future payments to Iran after news that the U.S. paid the country $1.7 billion early this year. Some of that money was transferred right around the time that Americans were freed from Iranian custody. Are there ever any circumstances where you think it's appropriate for the U.S. to pay in order to get hostages back home?
I think the problem we have with this hostage payment is obviously the administration wouldn't call it what it was at first, misrepresented it. And we also have a situation where you give hostage payments to the largest sponsor of terrorism in the world, and guess what? They took 3 more American hostages. So to me, our policy should not be to negotiating with countries that support terrorism like Iran, and that's why I've introduced this legislation. And this is also another area Governor Maggie Hassan has not talked about, this hostage payment. And I think this is something that's really important in terms of our national security. It's why I've been such an opponent of the Iran deal, because I think it has empowered Iran, and we continue to see their bad behavior. So this ransom payment was wrong because it's encouraging future grab, unfortunately, of Americans. And what we want to do is stop that country from taking Americans and stop them from their support of terrorism.
Thank you. Mr. Rubens.
These Iran deals negotiated by the Obama administration have been abysmal, probably the worst negotiations that we've seen in many, many years. Iran continues to develop implosion technology for nuclear weapons. They continue to develop ballistic missile technology. And no, we should never pay ransom to get our people back from terrorists or any country. This will set a horrible precedent.
All right, thank you, candidates. Sticking now to the panel, Josh Rogers has the next question.
We'll return to a domestic issue, and this one to you first, Senator. According to the Federal Reserve, delinquent college loan balances now exceed $1.2 trillion. Senator, you sponsored legislation that would allow private companies to refinance student debt. Could you explain how precisely that would help students here in New Hampshire?
First of all, I've supported in the Senate when interest rates were going to double for students, working on a bipartisan basis to actually make sure that they wouldn't double because the private interest rates with the Reserve were much lower. So I helped do that, and it's actually saved billions of dollars for students across the country, including here in New Hampshire. And then I've also introduced legislation for another option for students to have another option to refinance if it works for them and they can take it. I want to give students more options to obviously refinance their loans so that they can get in lower rates. I also would like to see colleges be more engaged in this in terms of helping the students with making sure that they have the success in repayment and have more skin in the game in terms of they continue increasing costs. And at some point, no matter how much loans, if we don't deal with the cost of colleges, I think that's a really important issue as well, and also making sure that our students have access and be able to get the best rates possible.
So, Mr. Rubens, what do you think needs to be done to deal with what I think it's fair to say is crippling student debt?
Yeah, no, we know that about 30% of those loans, that $1.2 trillion you're talking about, are likely, they're in arrears and likely not to be paid. So we've got a very serious problem. So we've got to go back to fundamentals here. Big government solutions, such as proposed by opponent and the Democrats, have well-meaning, but they've led to the colleges and universities sucking up increased aid, and they increase tuition rates faster than the increases in aid comes back in from the taxpayers. So we need to restructure the relationship between institutions of higher learning and students, and we need to remove the bankruptcy exclusion. Should a student acquire debt from a college or university and not be unable to pay that debt, they should be able to shed that debt through bankruptcy. In that case, the lender, the college, university, etc., would then be compelled to measure the ability of the student to repay the loan and assess the extent to which the educational product enhances the ability of that student to repay the loan. So we need to restructure the relationship between students and higher education in order that we have fair transactions.
Thank you, Mr. Rubens. All right, moving forward, let's talk about health care when it comes to veterans. And first question, first response goes to Senator Ayotte. We have 110,000 veterans here in New Hampshire, according to the latest census. We talk about this all the time. Why is New Hampshire the only state in the lower 48 that still does not have a full-service VA hospital?
Well, this is wrong, and one of the first pieces of legislation I introduced when I got in the Senate was to have New Hampshire have a full-service hospital. But I've also, knowing that our veterans, for example, in the North Country, they may want to go locally for care instead of, driving to Manchester or going over to White River Junction or Massachusetts. And that's why we've got to get this Veterans Choice Program right. This is something that I've worked with Senator Shaheen on, and we need to make sure that this program allows our veterans to go wherever they want to go to get the very best care. There's been too much bureaucracy with it. The VA has not implemented it properly, and I'm fighting to get this implemented properly because I want to make sure that our veterans don't have to wait, that they get the very best care. And I've also been fighting for more accountability in the VA. Like, for example, people who committed misconduct that got bonuses, trying to claw those bonuses back, because there needs to be more accountability, because our veterans who have done so much for this nation deserve the very best.
All right, Mr. Rubens, what do you think? Should New Hampshire have does it need a full-service VA hospital, or should veterans be able to go anywhere if the government's going to pay for the health care?
We have a sacred duty to our veterans to provide them the world's finest health care. And we're not doing this. The wait lists are longer. Congress has known about this problem for years, and particularly when this problem hit the headlines in April 2014. Congress has known about this problem for years, and they have not fixed it. Okay? This is unconscionable, it's intolerable, and I will not stand for this as a United States Senator. What we need to do is, and the choice program is not working, we need to allow veterans to choose the hospital or provider of their choice with no VA bureaucrats standing in the way. We need to allow the firing of VA administrators who are corrupt and incompetent right away, no back pay, and we need to deal with the immense 4-year-long Veterans Disability Appeals wait list. Veterans are waiting for this. This needs to be shortened rapidly. Again, our veterans deserve, we've promised them the world's best health care. Congress has fallen down on the job on this one. This has got to change.
Let's change the pace up a little bit, do a lightning round. Candidates, just kind of keep your answers to a few seconds. Mr. Rubens? Lightning round?
Lightning.
Okay, all right. Just get you on record a couple things.
Can I do it?
Well, so you get to start then. Let's start here.
Yeah.
Should there be term limits in Congress?
Yes, I have self-imposed a 2-term limit on myself. I have actively traveled around the country promoting a term limits constitutional amendment. Absolutely.
Senator?
Yes, and I've co-sponsored legislation in my time in the Senate to establish term limits.
2 terms, 3 terms?
I think 2 terms in the Senate, obviously the House a little bit longer, but it really, in terms of term limits, you know, I think they need to be in place.
All right, and if it doesn't pass, are you going to run again next time if you win this time?
I'm focused on running now.
Okay, fair enough. All right, next question. As a state resident, do you think the hands-free law, we'll go to you one, Senator, do you think the hands-free law is government overreach?
I think that people should have been able to decide on their own. It's important to keep people safe, but really this is a state issue. But I believe that people can take personal responsibility to keep themselves safe. And obviously we shouldn't be texting when we're driving, and distracted driving is important to address. But I really think that people should take personal responsibility for this.
It is a state law, Mr. Rubens. Do you agree with the Senator on this one?
I think the state has made a wise decision on creating a hands-free law. I've seen people driving along, eating hamburgers, doing their hair, texting, looking down, not even looking at the road. It's a problem, and this law is making a difference. Law enforcement is finding this a useful tool to dramatically increase highway safety, and this has got to be done.
All right, fair enough. Next question for you, Mr. Rubens. Should transgender students be allowed to use any bathroom in a public school for the gender that they identify with?
Yeah, I want to keep the government out of the business of bathroom definition. This is ridiculous. The 10th Amendment grants to the federal government certain powers, and all other powers are delegated and reserved to the states and to the people. And the local school districts can deal with this. I myself own shopping malls, okay? And we have dealt with this issue without any problem whatsoever. Lightning round, sorry.
All right, thank you. Same question for you, Senator.
Yeah, I think it's really important that kids feel comfortable wherever they are, and these are decisions that are best made locally, but we need to make sure that kids feel comfortable in our schools.
All right, and Senator, do you think that the death penalty should be repealed, federal death penalty?
No, I do not. And in fact, I think it's really important, especially when it comes to the murder of our law enforcement officers in the line of duty, so that the message is that you don't take the life of a law enforcement officer. And so I would not support that.
Mr. Rubens, keep it, death penalty?
Keep the death penalty.
All right, thank you very much. Next question, headlines. We've seen it a lot in the headlines lately. NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick refusing to stand for the national anthem out of protest. What do you think about that?
It's his First Amendment right. He is insulting Americans, I think, but it's his First Amendment right, and that should be defended. I'll stop there.
Okay,
Yeah.
Senator?
Our men and women have fought and died for his First Amendment right to do that, but I don't have to agree with it. I don't agree with it. And again, I'll say he's no Tom Brady.
He's not. And if you guys were the commissioner, you'd have unilateral authority to do whatever you wanted to, right? All right, thank you. Moving forward. Next question coming from the panel. Josh Rogers.
All right, Mr. Rubens, can you talk about something that will be of interest to you, I assume, your political evolution from a self-described radical centrist 2 decades ago to a hardline conservative who is making the case tonight that Senator Ayotte is not pure enough as a Republican. What's at your ideological core?
I am a person who believes in liberty, as I did 22 years ago when I described myself in that fashion. Back at that time, it was 1992. We face very similar problems now as we did then, except they're far worse. And one of my animating issues is one where I find my opponent promised to be a fiscal conservative, gets down to Washington and votes for trillions of dollars of additional debt. She voted to raid $117 billion from Social Security and eliminated the debt ceiling. So this animated me in 1992. It animates me now. What we need to do about this problem, same as we did then, except it's so much more serious now. We're facing $1 trillion a year in debt as far as the eye can see. We need to do what Republicans have done in the 90s, and we need to have U.S. senators with backbone. We need to vote no on these budgets and drag big spending Republicans and Democrats and the president to the bargaining table and balance the budget. This is the single greatest threat to U.S. national security, and it's robbing us of future prosperity. So absolutely, I've not changed on this.
Senator, you have the opportunity to respond. You were invoked once again.
We have to get our fiscal house in order. As the mother of 2 children, $19 trillion of debt, we can't pass that on to our children. So I've supported a balanced budget amendment. On the Budget Committee, I helped craft the first balanced budget in 14 years. Every committee I serve on, I look for ways to cut wasteful spending, including on the Armed Services Committee, where I cut the missile to nowhere, billions of dollars to a weapons program that was never going to come to fruition. I've also saved money in my personal Senate budget.
But Senator, you voted for trillions of dollars of additional debt, and the votes are what counts. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, I voted against many Senate Democrat appropriations bills. And, you know, what Mr. Rubens referred to is when I have voted, I voted to make sure that our men and women in uniform have had the resources to fight ISIS, or the resources for our heroin epidemic that I've been fighting for New Hampshire, or to suspend the medical device tax, which is so important to so many employers in New Hampshire. So yes, I have looked at these bills on a one-on-one basis to make sure that I'm focusing on what's right for New Hampshire.
Back to the panel for a follow-up.
You know, one focus of yours throughout this campaign and tonight certainly is to talk about your efforts to work in a bipartisan manner to, quote, reach across the aisle on a number of fronts, environmental issues to the drug crisis. But, you know, your voting record for the first half of your term is starkly different from the second half of your term in terms of partisanship. So how do you make the case that your enthusiasm for bipartisan action isn't simply motivated by a coming election?
Josh, I have one of the most bipartisan records in the Senate.
But the distinction
and I've also been called a no-labels problem solver. And let me go back to my time as Attorney General. First appointed by a Republican governor, twice reappointed by a Democrat governor, and I worked across the aisle then on getting things done to keep the people of New Hampshire safe. This is part of my DNA. It's work that I've done in the Senate, and I've been able to get results, whether it's the heroin legislation, fighting for better care for our veterans, suspending the medical device tax, stopping internet taxes that are coming that'll hurt our state. So I know that we have to work together to get things done, and it actually goes back to my time as Attorney General.
Well, so Senator, as you've been there for 6 years now. Why is it so hard for Congress in general to get things done? This week's vote on the Zika virus funding being a good example of this. You know, didn't happen. Lots of finger pointing back and forth.
Because that's why we need to build bridges, and so that's my focus has been, you know, find common ground and also work with anyone to solve problems. And to me, that's what we need to do. That's why I do have a bipartisan record. That's why I was able to get the heroin legislation passed. That's why I'm able to get things done, whether it was for our police and fire. They were going to tax their benefits when for their family members when they were killed in the line of duty, working across the aisle to get national legislation passed to make sure those benefits wouldn't be taxed so that they're treated fairly. Those are areas where, by the way, if you couldn't look for common ground, then you weren't going to get something done.
So, Mr. Rubens, you're obviously outspoken about what you believe ought to be done. What makes you capable of reaching across the aisle in the U.S. Senate a highly partisan atmosphere to avoid the sort of gridlock that
Right.
you complain about.
Yeah. Well, let me start again with the incumbent here, Senator Ayotte. Her approach of bipartisan capitulation to failed policies that have made life worse for Americans, the immense explosion of debt, the open borders, the borders are still wide open, the failure to deal with our veterans' problems. Bipartisan capitulation doesn't work. She's got an F from Conservative Review. She's got a 27. She votes like Annie Kuster, a liberal Democrat in the second CD in the U.S. Senate. I believe that we need a Republican in the U.S. Senate who votes like a Republican, and we don't need to abandon our values to solve problems. And I did this when I was in the state Senate. I got the charter school bill passed into law, and I had to get Democrats. I chaired the Granite State Coalition against expanded gambling, and I worked with Senator Ayotte on that problem, and we kept casinos out of the state for 10 years. So it's not necessary to abandon core values to get stuff done. If you're doing the business of the lobbyists in K Street, yeah, they've bought both Democrats and Republicans, and this is what they mean by bipartisanship. Okay, I don't buy that stuff.
Mr. Rubin, and so you can certainly respond if you'd like, Senator Ayotte. 30 seconds.
Well, I'm about getting results, and I know that one party isn't going to solve everything for us. So, but I have focused on cutting wasteful spending. For example, making sure that money that was going to our enemies, passing bipartisan legislation, saving $30 million to do that. Every single committee I work on, I've been focusing on getting our fiscal house in order. And for example, bipartisan legislation called the Duplication Elimination Act to actually take up finally the work of waste, fraud, and abuse. And by the way, it's bipartisan to actually address these issues. And that's what I think we need to do if we want to get things done.
Thank you, Senator. Back to the panel, John DeStaso.
Yes, for Senator Ayotte, on the flip side of bipartisanship, you've joined with party leadership, including Mitch McConnell, who you have praised, in refusing to hold hearings for President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, despite the fact that Republicans have the majority in the Senate and could have blocked the president's choice through the confirmation process. How can you defend against the charge that your refusal to go through that process was motivated by the coming election?
The people of this country, we lost a tremendous justice with Antonin Scalia, and we now have, obviously, a court that's a 4-4 court. And we're in a position where the nomination is going to impact the rights of people in this country for decades to come. And so I feel very strongly that the people of this country, divided government, divided court, they should weigh in by their vote this fall as to who they want to nominate this next justice, because it's going to have an impact on their constitutional rights for decades. And this is really about the people having a say here, and that's why I feel very strongly that the people of this country should weigh in, because this is very, very important to your constitutional rights.
Senator,
Senator Rubin,
Republicans do have the, hold on a second, John, Republicans do have the majority. Why not just have the hearings and, if you vote them out?
Because this will give an opportunity for the people of the country to weigh in. When you have divided government and you have a situation where you have a divided court, and so as I look at this, why wouldn't you want the people to weigh in? Because we're in a position where this is going to change people's constitutional rights, and that makes a difference.
John?
Okay, thanks. Mr. Rubens? Yes, I was just going to ask you, how would you have, what would have been your strategy in this situation?
The reason Mitch McConnell does not want to have a hearing is expressly because of weak-kneed Republicans like my opponent, who said she would have voted for Sonia Sotomayor for Supreme Court, who voted to confirm Loretta Lynch, who, by the way, gave Hillary Clinton a free pass on lying about national security secrets with respect to her emails. So Mitch McConnell, aware of the fact that there are weak-kneed Republicans in the U.S. Senate, wants to defend our first 10 amendments, wants to defend our Second Amendment rights, because the nominee proposed by President Obama is anti-Second Amendment.
Would you have agreed with party leadership and not held the hearings too?
Only because of the fact that Mitch McConnell knows that there are weak-kneed Republicans, again, like my opponent, who said she would have voted for Sonia Sotomayor. The proof is in the pudding again. It's in the votes.
Senator, 30 seconds.
That is just simply not true. And in fact, you know, groups that support Governor Maggie Hassan in this race have dropped millions of dollars attacking me on my position. And you know what? I feel strongly that the people of this country and New Hampshire should weigh in. And so I've stood strong on that because I believe you have the opportunity to weigh in. It's important, and it's about your constitutional rights. And I'm going to stand up for your constitutional rights, which to me are very fundamental to who we are.
Thank you, Senator. Dan Toohey, next question.
Thank you. It's a question for both of you. Mr. Rubins, you first. From Hezbollah to Al-Qaeda to ISIS, it's been a generational fight. How can radical Islamic terror ever be defeated?
Well, again, I got into this a bit in a prior answer. We do need to defeat radical Islamic terrorism, and it really does begin. It begins with forcing our so-called allies. We know that Turkey, Erdogan's son, was the conduit by which black market oil from ISIS in Syria and Iraq was getting into the marketplace. Erdogan needs to be informed, forced by America to stop doing this. They seem to be moving in that direction. Saudi Arabia, we know, funded, as I mentioned, the terrorists who killed almost 3,000 Americans on 9/11. We know that Saudi Arabia is the world's leading funder of terror and terror ideology. So we've got to get at the root cause of the problem. And secondly, we've got to reject Hillary Clinton and Senator Ayott's failed nation-building war strategies that have simply spread terrorism, okay, and made America less safe. We need to pay attention to our civil defense issues. We have terrorists now as a result of these policies. We have terrorists on U.S. soil, so we need to beef up civil defense. And again, contrasting my opponent here, this is very much the wrong time to weaken Second Amendment rights because individuals need to use firearms to defend themselves now with enemies on our soil. That's why it's in the Constitution.
Senator,
sorry,
would you like to rebut?
I strongly believe that we need to defeat radical Islamist terrorists. And that begins, first of all, by a president who doesn't call ISIS the JV team. We have to recognize this threat for what it is. And when you look at what happened, the vacuum that was created in Iraq and Syria, when, against the advice of military commanders, which I was very critical of at the time, the president removed the follow-on force in Iraq, that created this vacuum. And unfortunately, these vacuums are where these terrorists thrive. And so we do have to go after them. We have to support our men and women in uniform. I'm the proud wife of a combat veteran who served in Iraq. And I know that they need our support, but we need to be clear with terrorists, and we can't be treating them like the JV team. We have to support our first responders and make sure that they have the tools they need to keep our country safe. And nothing more important than keeping this country safe. Without security, you can't have prosperity, and without security, you can't have freedom.
All right, time is flying in this hour. It's just about up, so we're up to our final question before we get to the closing statements. So the question is, if we've learned one thing in this election cycle, people are angry. They're fed up with government, status quo, business as usual in Washington. So what can you do, Senator? We'll start with you. What can you do to turn that anger into optimism?
We live in the greatest country on earth, and I know that when we work together, we can get anything done. And that's why I've focused on getting results, on making sure that I do find common ground, but I also fight for our conservative principles, to get our fiscal house in order, to help make sure that we get the burden of government that's hurting our small businesses, our heroin epidemic, to pass legislation by working together to get results, and supporting our men and women in uniform. Because when they go and defend us, they don't ask if you're a Republican, Democrat, or Independent. They're Americans, and we need to work together to get things done. We're a great country, and we can get anything, and nothing can stop us when we work together.
Mr. Rubins, please keep the answer limited to the question. How do you turn that anger into optimism?
The American public has discovered, both Democrats and Republicans, that Congress is bought and paid for in the entire Washington system. And this bipartisan corruption, where Washington lobbyists and K Street runs policy, they have prevented the American public from getting answers to their problems and solutions. It's why we have things like Medicaid not being able to negotiate for the cost of pharmaceuticals. My opponent took $200,000 from the pharmaceutical industry. It has effects. So this is why I've served on the boards of both NH Rebellion and Take Back Our Republic, because I believe we need to do something about this problem. We need first transparency. The voters need to know where the money is coming from in real time online. And this is why I also fundamentally differ from my opponent's vote in 2013 to gut the Stock Act, which required disclosure of insider trading transactions by members of Congress and high staff in Congress. I fundamentally differ with this approach. So we need a change to this bipartisan partisan corruption that has led to these burgeoning debts, that prevents us from fixing the tax code, that lead to this surfeit of regulation, these horrible military policies that have made us less safe, pork in the military budget that robs us of readiness to keep us safe.
So that's your plan
All
for
of this
optimism?
needs to change.
30 seconds, Senator?
Yeah.
Let me just say, first of all, I supported the Stock Act, and maybe you should do your homework, Mr. Rubens, because the only revision to the Stock Act has been to protect our national security professionals. Members of Congress have to fully disclose. You can go look. Mine's online. So stop misrepresenting that. And, you know, what I believe, that money, I offered Governor Maggie Hassan the People's Pledge in this race, the same one that Senator Shaheen signed, and now you've seen millions of dollars of false ads attacking me on the TV,
Senator,
and we should be in a
we're almost out
position
of
where
time in
that
this
shouldn't
hour.
happen in this race.
We got to get to closing statements.
you
Mr.
can-
Rubens, respond
Okay.
in the closing statement if you
You
like,
need
but
to
take your
fact
60
check
seconds.
this. March 2013, the incumbent here voted to gut the Stock Act. So it has been a delight for me to be with New Hampshire voters over the past months in this campaign. I'm a small businessman. I've started and run 10 businesses. I co-founded one of our state's first drug and alcohol abuse crisis centers, and I've served in the state Senate. And I'd like to take my backbone and my imagination and my persuasiveness and get cracking on solving this country's major problems. And we need to have prosperity back for everyone again. We need to keep our country safe, and we need to get big government off our backs and out of our wallets. So I keep my promises, and I can't be bought because I'm not for sale. Please vote for me, Jim Rubens, next Tuesday for U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubens. Senator, closing statement, please.
Thank you for listening tonight. Every day I wake up with a sense of purpose to fight for you and your family for a better quality of life. And that's what this election is about, our children and our future. And I know that the only way we're going to get things done is by working together, like the work that I've done to pass bipartisan legislation to address our heroin epidemic, or to make it easier to create good-paying jobs, or to get our fiscal house in order, or affordable health care. I've been proud to fight for our men and women in uniform, for better quality care, and also for our men and women who work at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, those excellent members of our Guard. But there's so much more work to be done. And I know it's going to take a fighter for New Hampshire, but also someone who can find common ground to get results. That's what I've done in the Senate. That's why I'm running, so that we can continue the work that we have started together.
Thank you very much, candidates, for your participation in what was certainly a lively debate. Best of luck to you on Tuesday of next week, Election Day. That's going to wrap up our debate tonight with the Republican primary candidates for U.S. Senate. Be sure to join us again tomorrow when we host the 2nd Congressional District Republican primary debate between Jim Lawrence and Jack Flanagan. And of course, you can get full in-depth political coverage that can only be found on WMUR.com, on our website and mobile app as well. For now, I'm Josh McKelvin. See you back here tomorrow. Have a great night, everyone.